The final element of the project is decorating, and I want to show you a particular technique. It's called paper resist. So here's a piece I made earlier, and it's a little box, and there's the lid, something I didn't show you when you were looking at the making section. You can put, for a lid, you can put these little extra pieces inside so when it slots in it doesn't slip off. There's lots of different ways of doing that, and this one is nothing in particular. Now we're going to decorate it, and I want to show you something called paper resist. Paper resist is a technique for putting a stencil effectively onto the surface. Now there are two ways of doing this, and one way is to paint the surface with one colour, and I'm going to use some yellow. And you need to paint, as I said on a previous video, you need to paint this thick enough that you can't see through the paint. Now, once you've painted the first colour, you're going to put on a stencil before you put on the second colour. Now, there are various ways of stenciling with paper resist. I'm going to use newspaper. Here's a scrap of newspaper. Going to tear a bit. You might choose to cut it with scissors, but I'm just going to show you a torn piece. And you're going to dip that in water. Make sure that's nice and wet in the water. Don't have too much dripping off it. And then lay that over. Now ideally this would be a little bit drier, but just for now, so that we can see how it's done, lay that over the paint, but make sure there's no air bubbles in the underneath the paper. And now we're going to put a different colour around the paper. I'll use this dark green, I think. So make sure that the pot is well mixed. We talked about these colours, they're made with underglaze stain. And then paint around your paper with the second colour. Now you need to spend more time on this than I'm spending. You need it to be pretty much dry before you take it off, but I'm going to take it off straight away because I just think you'd like to see what happens. And when you peel off the paper, you get the two colours and you've got what's called paper resist. The other thing you can do with your colours is you can then draw into the surface of them. You can draw pictures or whatever, and then that is then ready for firing and glazing. And here's a nice little tip. If you take, as I did earlier, a piece of paper and you make a nice little design. Here we have a bunch of people, and you wet those. I'm going to wreck this now because it's tricky to get it onto the paper, onto the piece. And then you lay that on. I knew that wouldn't work. And let me just get a couple of these lined up so you can see. There we go. And once you have your design stuck on, yeah, don't worry about that. I think I might give this one up as a bad job. Once you have your design stuck on, you then paint over it. You don't need a first colour underneath it. You can literally paint over your paper and then pick it off. If you forget a piece of paper under the paint, and so there's the piece of paper, and I've painted over it and then I forget to take it off, when you fire that in the kiln, the paper will of course burn away because paper doesn't heat up very high, but it will leave a brown stain. So you really do need to be careful to pick away all the paper. That's paper resist. Once you've decorated your piece completely, then you're going to drop it in. It'll be dry, it'll be biscuit fired, and then it'll be clear glazed. And this one actually hasn't been painted with slips. This has just been painted with glaze. So you don't have to do the slip painting. You can just glaze it a different colour. So I just thought I'd show you a couple more pieces before we go. This one was made by one of my students, and it is based on a circle of clay. So once you've rolled the slab, cut a circle, draw around something, and then that circle was divided into 3 sections, and those sections obviously fit together. And then the person who made this literally cut a strip of clay, quite a long strip, using a piece of wood like that, cutting either side of it, and then just went round each piece. 1, 2, 3. Each of these corners would be beveled because they're not right angles. If they're right angles, like That's a right angle. You get away without beveling that, but you'd need to bevel all the narrow angles. Sticking together in the same way I described. Make sure, because this is for food, that there is no cracks behind the soft clay sausages. And then in this case, she had enough clay left to make a tray for it to sit on. Here's another nice one. Little boat, single piece of clay along the bottom. It isn't joined here, it just curves up. And this just curves in. So you can see beveled here, no beveling here, and little extras to go with the basic form. And just to come back to this one, which I like very much, looks really difficult, but don't get too worried. If you make a paper template for the front, which you would do by folding a paper in half, maybe cutting it out, then you make the front, cut it out, make another one by laying the front on top of the clay and cutting round it for two the same, and then cut a long strip of plain clay, which is this width, and then each time you change direction, you need to cut and make a new piece, cut, make a new piece. Each new piece, you need soft clay to join it to the last piece. She also made holes in it, and those holes need to be done before you join the pieces. She happened to be a wood carver, the lady that made this, and so she carved into the surface of the front. She did that before she stuck the pieces together. Loads of ideas.